Introducing tools of policy analysis in education. Costs. Hello. Today we are discussing something quite exciting. In policymaking, many key decisions have to be made. How many schools are needed in a region? How many of these should be secondary schools? What kind of scheme would encourage participation of girls in schooling? How much to spend on a nutritious midday meal, etc. A way of arriving at answers to these questions is through understanding the context. Finding out how many children fail to transition from primary schools to secondary schools in a region can tell us whether there is a need to increase access to secondary schools there. And we find this out in many ways. By looking at dropout rates, or the number of children who don't continue from one grade to the next, or the difference in enrollment in the highest grade of primary schools and the lowest grade of the secondary schools. Once we know there's a problem at hand, we look at its causes. Is student retention in schools low because there are not enough secondary schools? Or that existing schools have weak capacity, or that they are not accessible, physically or otherwise? Is it that high poverty pushes children to work past a certain age in a region or community? Are there any other factors? Finding out the applicability of each of these causes helps us figure out why the problem exists and how it may be solved. In a way, policy analysis resembles a puzzle with many pieces, and as an analyst, you have to put them together to see the big picture. To solve a single puzzle, you may need already collected data, such as enrollment rate, or you may need to visit the region or site and speak to the key actors and collect data, which is otherwise not available or may be incomplete. Sources of data vary based on what you're looking for, and the methods of analysis will also depend on the question you are hoping to answer, or the purpose of the puzzle. For instance, analyzing costs in education can serve different purposes. Private spending or household expenditure on education tells us the demand for education. Looking at public spending, on the other hand, can help us get a sense of how much is being invested in education. From documents such as budgets and spending reports, it's possible to get aggregate amounts, such as money allocated to a district for a financial year, which can be further broken down to unit costs, such as spending on each student in the district. Aggregate amounts convey the overall fiscal effort, but in and of itself, it doesn't tell us much about what happens on the ground. Unit costs, or breaking spending down to smaller units, such as spending per student or per school or per textbook, helps give us details about the aggregate amounts. One way of getting the unit costs is to divide the aggregate amount by the number of given units. Per pupil expenditures are usually calculated this way. State budgets tell you how much is being spent on elementary education, and enrollment data tells you the number of children in schools in that state. But as you will see, budgets are often organized under rubrics or line items, which do not allow any clear-cut attribution of spending by level or type of education. Many times, expenditure is organized according to source of funding, and so it appears under many heads, and it can be difficult to assimilate. Education economists at the World Bank recommend that it is good to complement the breaking down of aggregate amounts to unit costs by dividing it by the number of units, by also calculating cost components of spending to arrive at an aggregate estimate. The formula that World Bank provides for calculating unit cost is simple. The formula states that the unit cost, or UC, is equal to the aggregate public budget, that is B, for education, divided by the total number of students, N. This is one way of calculating per student expenditure, but it breaks this down further. It goes on to say that not only is unit cost equal to aggregate budget divided by the number of students, the aggregate budget is equal to the sum of different cost components, such as staff remuneration, which is denoted as P in the formula, goods and non-staff services, which is denoted as G, welfare services, which are denoted as W, administrative overheads, which is denoted by A. All of these different cost components add up to make the overall budget. And to find out the per student spending on any of these individual components, you just have to divide them by N, or the number of students. For example, in the formula, P divided by N tells us the per student cost of staff remuneration. So if total staff salary is X amount, we can divide by the number of students and find out how much we are spending on each child's education in terms of paying the teachers to teach them. You can add more elements or remove some from the pool of P, G, W, and A. The core idea is that estimates of unit cost and aggregate amounts must also be consistent across various individual cost components, such as spending on teaching learning materials or teacher salaries, etc. So unit cost of P, which can be shown as UCP, should add up with UCG, UCW, and so on to make the aggregate amount. You can make the figures more specific by identifying whether they pertain to rural or urban schools, the pupil-teacher ratio in these schools, etc. The cost components and their nature can also vary based on the unit of analysis. So when our unit is a school, we know schools have fixed costs or expenditures which they have to make, such as rent or electricity, administrative staff, etc. These are also variable costs. These depend on the size of the school or the number of enrollments. If there are more students, the school may need more teaching staff, more learning materials, and so forth. So the total cost of a school is actually broken down to fixed costs and unit variable costs and enrollments. TC is equal to TFC plus UVC multiplied by N, where TC is the school's total costs, TFC is total fixed costs, UVC is unit variable costs, which can depend on the number of enrollments or size of the school shown as N. When a school has a large number of students or high enrollment, its fixed costs get dispersed, and it brings down the overall costs. The impact of what economists call economies of scale is seen in school operation costs, and this affects decisions made about opening or closing schools or consolidating small schools into a big school. Economies of scale is one among many factors which are considered when making such decisions. When we bring in a new factor, such as learning levels or test results, they can help us calculate how much we are spending to get a certain outcome. A value for money or a cost-effectiveness analysis looks at whether each rupee spent has given an adequate return. When it comes to public spending, looking at results helps us get a sense of how successful or poor the spending has been in establishing outcomes. This can be done by looking at per student spending and learning levels, as shown through assessments as National Achievement Survey. This can also be looked at a state level or district level. but using indicators, such as learning outcomes, helps us put the spending in context. This helps compare policy options based on their marginal impact on outcomes relative to costs. We'll look at this further in detail as we proceed.